most important thing that I ever said was the thing I just said before the recording started. No, don't worry, I'm just kidding. Hi, everyone. It's me, Dwight Hurst, your psychotherapist and champion goat identifier. There's one right there. No, I made that up, that whole credential. I hope you can still trust me throughout the rest of this workshop. I am glad to be back at you again, sharing another skill in the DBT lexicon of distress tolerance. Just to reiterate, distress tolerance is your ability to survive distress. Distress is the psychological term for bad stress. There is such a thing as eustress, which is E-U stress. That's how you spell that in case you ever get that word in a spelling bee. It is a good stress, like euphoria is a good kind of phoria. So it's good for you. I'll workshop that a little bit. Don't worry, by next week that'll be much better. Thank you. Anyway, eustress is the kind of stress that's good that you can enjoy. For instance, if you go out and go skiing, you might find that your heart rate increases and that your muscles are going and your adrenaline is going, but you're enjoying it and it's actually beneficial. Other people maybe a little bit less hardcore than that, like me. I'm not a skier. Might go out and do some work or work out or go jogging or even work in the garden, something that isn't necessarily super stressful, but it gets the blood flowing. So there's a certain amount of stress, but it's good for you. Distress is the kind of stress that disses you, I guess. No, that's not really a joke. It's just dis meaning bad. So it's a bad stress, and you don't want too much of that if you can help it. And that's why we're practicing tolerating it. So today's skill in the DBT world is pretty simple and actually pretty useful. Let me share this with you. I'm going to show you something real quick. This is called the DBT diary card. I'm going to make it a little bigger. You can see it on the video if you're watching the video. It lists the 19 skills of DBT. Distress tolerance, as I said, we're in right now. We also have core mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, and emotion regulation. It's kind of a cheat sheet of all the different skills, and there's also the days of the week in case you want to keep track of how you're using them. On the other side, you have the place to keep track of your actions and urges that might be unhealthy, as well as any drug use if that's your jam that you need to track as well. There's also a way to rate your emotions. So that is something that exists. You can find that and actually get a digital copy of that in Excel format from my website, dwighthurst.com. If you want to go do that, you can. I think it's like 50 cents or 90 cents or 100 cents. I don't really know. Or if you donate to support these broadcasts, then you get one free that I will just email to you, as well as being involved in the DBT email list that I have existent. So enough of that. Let me tell you what we're doing today. Today we're going to be talking about pros and cons. Pros and cons. You can see that. You might be familiar with that term before because it's a normal human term that people use all the time. What are the pros and what are the cons? I don't mean professional people and criminal people. Thank you. I'm getting a little quicker with that. So what I mean, of course, is the pros and cons, the good and the bad, the pluses and the minuses of certain choices. Sounds pretty straightforward. In the most straightforward form, pros and cons generally refers to sitting down and making a list. And you'd be surprised of how much of therapeutic self-help interventions have to do with actually sitting down and making a list. Is the thing that I'm worried about urgent, or is it just important and I have to get to it eventually? Is it something I can control or something I can't control? These are all things that you can sit down and list. And I will say this for the simple definition, although that's not really the DBT definition, as you'll see in a moment. The simple definition of sitting down and writing a list of pros and cons of a certain choice is actually more powerful than we might give it credit, especially if you literally engage with list writing. If I actually write, there's a couple things happening there neurologically. I'm actually paying different kinds of attention to what I'm writing than if I'm just thinking it. If I'm thinking and I'm processing it one way. If I'm writing it, I have to think it, I have to edit it, I have to cut, copy, paste, do all those operations up here in order to get it out onto here. I'm also watching it happen and reading it at the same time that I'm writing it, and I'm going to review it visually as well as cognitively. So I also, if I say it out loud, I'm also getting that auditory. But there's one sense that sometimes we forget about, which is our kinetic, physical sense of touch. When you're writing something, you're actually the one writing it. Your hand is forming the thing, or however you write. I don't know your life. You're forming the words physically as well, which is another way of processing information. So actually writing things down can be very helpful. But I want to reiterate, the regular definition of pros and cons is not the DBT definition. In DBT, in the world of dialectical behavioral therapy, pros and cons are not just pros and cons of a choice. No, my friends. What we're talking about here is deeper and more important than that. See this? That didn't work very well. There we go. See that? Get rid of that choice. Haha, take that. So it's not just the pros and cons of a choice. What it is it's pros and cons of using skills. Yay, skills. Skills. I'm pro skills in this instance, especially because I'm giving you some skill instruction. So what are skills? Well, in the world of DBT, it's all about the skills. That's what we're talking about in these 19 or 20 or whatever videos that I'm making for you. Skills are the things you use to cope, the things you use to deal with your emotions. See, DBT was invented for those who have overwhelming emotional reactions, and sometimes emotional overreactions. You could also be another way of saying that. People who are so overwhelmed by being flooded with emotion that they're making poor choices. That, by the way, encompasses all of humanity, at least some of the time. We all have times that we get super emotional. We all have triggers that trigger us to become flooded with emotion. When we become flooded with emotion, we go into an anxiety mode, a survival mode, fight or flight. We don't think as clearly. And so the idea of using skills is a sort of obvious way to intervene with that and get our brain back into thinking mode. So what we're doing when we do the pros and cons analysis is we're actually analyzing, or analyzing if you want to be technical. What we're really analyzing is skills. Should I use some skills right now? You see, there's always in life a couple options. We can do nothing, or we can do something, if you will. I can let things go the way they are, or I can let them go the way that they've always gone, or I can let them go a different way. Let's do that. Let's let them go a different way. Get it? So that's an important thing to ask ourselves. Some of the things that you notice is that if something is painful, that's okay. In other words, our brain gets okay with things being painful as long as they are also comfortable. Oh, this is too big a font. If something's painful and comfortable, it's familiar. See that? That's what happens when you play with typing. Stop all that. Okay. If something's painful, we'll get used to it. One of the things that's the most stressful of all, that does cause a significant amount of distress, is change. And to do something that is going to change things can actually be very traumatic to us, especially if we're the agent of change. If I want to change something about my life, you might have noticed that if you've ever decided to change up your own fitness, or you decide to go and do some exercises, or maybe you want to drop some pounds or something, that you're trying to do that. One of the things that happens is your brain and your body are evolved to crave a stable, safe normalcy, what they call homeostasis, where things stay the same. So if I start running every day, one of the things that happens is my body is also probably going to get more hungry and want to eat more food, because it wants to keep the calorie intake and the calorie burning ratio kind of the same, there is a tendency to want to do that. And so we self-sabotage sometimes when we have goals. When we have goals of our emotional health, where I want to start using skills, let's say that I want to use my 5 senses to calm myself when I get super upset before I make choices. Let's say that I want to count to 10 before I yell or lose my temper. Let's say that I use any of the skills we've been talking about, or any skills at all, to try to better myself. One of the things that's going to happen is there's going to be a natural resistance, because the way that I have been doing it has been working for me. And so one of the things about pros and cons is that I need a real good reason to get myself to not use the unhealthy things that I've been using so far, and to change. 2 ways to do this. The same 2 ways that I always like to talk about. The proactive and the reactive. Proactive looks like this. When I'm calm, remember that, calm, just calm down. All right, now that you're calm, thanks to that, proactive use of pros and cons is when I am in a calm state of mind, a non-crisis, that I actually go through this and I might say, you know what, I'm going to actually think of some pros and cons of using the skills that I've been learning, especially because those skills are hard. I don't want to use them sometimes. And so I might actually do this, where I would make 2 columns. And I'd say, what are the pros of using my skills? Maybe the pros of using my skills are that I might get a better result. Maybe I would find that I'm going to have more of something that I want, more friends, more self-control, more stability, more better something. More better something is the most specific that I thought of there, unfortunately. Now, it's also good when I'm doing this to be realistic about the cons. There we go. What are the cons of using those skills? Well, it's going to be difficult, and that's something that's worth looking at. Okay, this isn't working. Let's stop that. Let's be honest about I'll adjust the font for next week so I'm not confusing you with my little handout that I'm creating there while we're going. What are the cons? There are cons to using skills. It's hard to use skills. It's uncomfortable to use skills. One of the things that's one of the biggest cons that we ought to be really honest about is if I start to use my DBT skills, or any skills for that matter, one of the hardest things about that is that I'm going to fail. And not only am I going to fail, I'm going to fail and notice it. Because if I am losing my temper and yelling at my children 90% of the time, I get stressed. And I start to work hard on reducing that. Maybe I notice the sounds around me, and I use the sense of touch to ground in by noticing my feet on the floor, as we talked about with the 5 senses last time. I notice the feeling of my body in the chair, and I ground myself with that and try to calm down. I try to take maybe some deep breaths and pay very close, mindful attention to the feeling of my muscles contracting around the air, or the feeling of the temperature of the air in around my body, and I'm like really focusing. And hey, you know what? I'm able to calm down enough that I don't yell that night. And then every night for the next week, I do lose my temper and yell at my kids. I'm going to be more acutely aware of that. And that sense of failure is actually something that keeps us from doing healthy things, because we feel like really bad. Now, in reality, of course, the pros, if we keep that in mind, we tend to focus just on the cons if we just leave it to our own natural devices. But if we purposefully and proactively sit down and say, what are the pros? What's the benefit of this situation that I'm doing? Well, the benefit is that I was aware and I had insight, and I felt bad about all those other 6 nights of the week. And so therefore, if I continue, I probably will do better because I will be motivated. So insight, motivation, those are pros. Also, I'm not just automatically yelling at my kids and thinking it's okay anymore. I'm trying and focusing on trying to change it. And by the way, I have some success as well as some failure. But I need to be aware of that con if I'm going to really get myself to do it. It's sort of like con myself to do it. Anyway, so yeah, when you're looking at that's what I call a proactive strategy of pros and cons. Proactive meaning, once again, when you are calm and able to think rationally clearly. There is such thing, by the way. I'm doing this more reactively. Reactively would look like this. I'm going to write this list down, pros and cons, maybe pros versus cons. There we go. I'm going to do pros versus cons really quickly. Maybe I'm in a situation where I have to. I'll give you an example. This is an example that happens quite a bit. Think of somebody who's trying to improve the way they handle stress with the use of substances. Maybe they've been drinking. Maybe they have been drinking too much, and it's becoming distracting, and it's not going well for their lives. And they have a bad day at work. They have a phone conversation with their spouse on the way home that doesn't go well either. They're driving past the bar where they always used to stop, get a little hammered, and then drive home. By the way, driving a little bit intoxicated, and then get into a bigger fight with the spouse when they get home. And there's that pull, though. There's that feeling that, you know what, just this time, I'm just going to go back to that. I'm going to go back to that right now. This is not a proactive moment. This is not a calm, serene moment. This is a moment when you're in a state of flux, a state of crisis, a state of distress, where you're feeling pulled towards an unhealthy coping mechanism. Grab a sheet of paper. Like I said, there's all these different ways of processing it. Grab a sheet of paper and say, what are the pros and cons of me doing the thing I've always done versus doing something different, using a skill, calming down, using communication with my spouse to work out that thing, or processing that the workday is over and accepting that this and moving on, and using some kind of a healthy coping mechanism. What are the pros and cons right now, this moment of doing that? And that's where I see some people make some really good decisions. Once again, one of the cons is always that it is hard, and you are going to fail sometimes. If you try to do this reactively in the moment, there will be times where it doesn't work for you. That's normal, because we all have this homeostasis thing going. Whenever we try to do change, we resist it. Our brain and our personality, our characteristics, everything about us, it resists the change. And so if we try it and it doesn't work and we wind up in that bar, that doesn't mean it won't work the next time, or maybe the next time, or however many times it takes until it starts to work. And I know this because I've seen it work in my life and in the lives of other people, but it takes a sustained effort. And so therefore, if you use proactive and reactive, pros and cons on whether or not to use healthy coping skills, it can actually help you to start to change your behavior more powerfully, more dramatically. So there you go. That's super useful, I hope. I mean, that's the whole point, right? So I am done for today. We'll be back again next Wednesday with more DBT skills for you. Once again, go to the website, dwighthurst.com/groups if you want to learn more about this project. If you want to forward a link of this video, you can do it through this YouTube channel, the Broken Brain Podcast YouTube channel, or you can send that link, dwighthurst.com/groups, because I do try to keep the most current video up on that website as well. You can check out our channel for other things. You'll see some of our live podcasts that we're doing now being broadcast here. Some more skills work is coming up, not only DBT, but anxiety reduction and relaxation skills, some other things like that. If you'd like to contribute to keeping this broadcasting going and keeping it free and available to everybody, you can go on to the website. There's a link there at that link I just said, the /groups. And you can donate anywhere from $1, I think, up to $70. If you want to donate that much, go for it. Lots of other good stuff there. Mostly the good stuff is you out there that are participating and watching. So please feel free to forward this to those who might benefit from it. Thanks again. As always, I'm here until the next time we meet, when the next time we meet is, and that's all. And I'm going to keep saying that until the thing stops recording, and try to make a funny face so that'll be the thing that sticks on the video. So